The crystalline spires of Nexus Station glittered like diamonds against the backdrop of endless space, their surfaces refracting light from 3 different suns. Kayla Harrison stood at the viewport of her diplomatic vessel, adjusting the collar of her formal uniform for the 100th time. After 15 years of deep space missions, she thought she'd be used to first contact scenarios by now. This one was different. The Vaesrox Empire had reached out unexpectedly, requesting human representation at their annual Galactic Council summit. It was unprecedented. They'd been notoriously isolationist since joining the interstellar community 3 centuries ago. Ambassador Harrison, her AI assistant's voice chimed softly. "We're receiving docking instructions from Nexus Control." "Thank you, ARIA." Kayla took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Any last-minute intelligence updates about our hosts?" "Nothing beyond standard briefing materials. The Vaesrox are classified as a Tier 3 civilization, specialized in biotechnology and genetic engineering. They'd maintained minimal contact with other species, citing cultural preservation as their primary concern." The ship shuddered slightly as the docking clamps engaged. Through the viewport, Kayla watched robotic arms extend to create a pressurized walkway. The station's atmospheric composition had been adjusted to Earth standard levels, a courtesy that would have been impossible just a decade ago, before humanity proved its worth to the galactic community. "Ambassador," ARI's tone shifted slightly, "I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures from the station. They don't match any known Vaesrox technology profiles." Kayla frowned. "Hostile." "Uncertain, but they appear to be concentrated around the diplomatic quarter where you'll be staying. Log it and forward to Earth Command. Standard protocol." Kayla straightened her jacket one final time. "Let's not jump to conclusions. The Vaesrox probably just upgraded their systems." The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss. 2 figures waited on the other side, tall, willowy beings with iridescent scales and elongated cranial structures. Their eyes, multifaceted like insects, reflected the station's lights in rainbow patterns. Ambassador Harrison, the taller one, spoke, their universal translator giving their words a slight metallic echo. "I am first speaker Ixal. Welcome to Nexus Station." Kayla bowed slightly, the appropriate greeting according to Vaesrox custom. "The honor is mine, first speaker. Earth extends its gratitude for this historic invitation." "Yes," Ixal's head tilted at an angle that made Kayla's neck hurt just watching. "We have long observed your species with great interest." Something in their tone made the hair on the back of Kayla's neck stand up. She'd learned to trust those instincts during her years in deep space diplomacy. Particularly, the second Vaesrox spoke, "Your remarkable physiological resilience." "I am Chief Researcher Vex. Your species' ability to survive on a death world has generated much scientific curiosity." "We're adaptable," Kayla replied carefully. "Earth taught us to be flexible." "Indeed." Ixal gestured down the corridor. "Please follow us to your quarters. We've prepared a special welcome ceremony." As they walked, Kayla noticed subtle changes in the station's lighting and temperature. The air felt heavier, more oppressive. Her diplomatic training screamed that something was wrong, but retreating now would risk offending the Vaesrox, potentially destroying years of careful relationship building. They reached a set of ornate doors that slid open silently. Inside, instead of the expected diplomatic suite, Kayla found herself staring at what could only be described as a laboratory. Medical equipment lined the walls, and in the center stood a containment chamber large enough for a human subject. "What is this?" Kayla stepped back, but found her path blocked by two more Vazroks who had appeared silently behind her. Ixal's multifaceted eyes seemed to gleam with an almost predatory light. "This, Ambassador Harrison, is your real welcome ceremony. You see, we've studied humanity from afar, but now we need to understand just how far we can push your legendary resilience." "This is an act of war." Kayla's voice remained steady, even as her mind raced through escape scenarios. Earth will do nothing," Vex interrupted, "because officially you never arrived. A tragic accident with your ship's drive system, we fear. Very unfortunate." The Vazroks behind her moved with shocking speed. Kayla managed to disable one with a quick elbow strike, her augmented bones giving the blow enough force to crack their exoskeleton, but the other caught her with some kind of energy field that sent her muscles into spasm. As darkness crept into the edges of her vision, Kayla heard Ixal speaking, "Begin the trials. Let's see what humanity is truly capable of." Her last conscious thought was a grim promise. They would soon learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't our physical resilience. It was what happened when you backed us into a corner. The real test was about to begin. Consciousness returned like a slow tide, bringing with it waves of dull pain. Kayla kept her eyes closed, using an old intelligence operative's trick to gather information. The air smelled sterile, with an underlying chemical tang. Something hummed nearby, probably medical equipment. Her arms and legs were restrained, but the bones had slight give to them. Amateur mistake. "The subject is conscious," a voice said. "Vex," she remembered. "Remarkable recovery time. Most species remain catatonic for at least 12 hours after neurosuppression." Kayla opened her eyes, blinking against harsh laboratory lights. "You know, if you wanted to study humans, you could have just asked. We have these things called universities." "Ah, the famous human humor response to stress." Ixal stepped into view, holding what looked like a data pad. "Fascinating. Most species retreat into themselves when faced with captivity. Most species don't have experience being the galaxy's underdog," Kayla replied, testing the restraints subtly. "Makes you develop certain coping mechanisms." The room was larger than she'd initially thought. Medical monitors lined one wall, displaying what she assumed were her vital signs. Several Vazroks researchers moved around the space, taking readings and adjusting equipment. They seemed almost giddy with excitement. "We'll begin with baseline stress tests," Vex announced, moving to a control panel. "Nothing too strenuous. We merely want to establish parameters." The air in the chamber suddenly grew thicker, heavier. Kayla felt pressure building in her lungs as the gravity increased. Normal Earth gravity was 1g. This felt like 2g, then 3g. She forced herself to keep breathing steadily, even as her chest struggled against the increasing weight. "Fascinating," one of the researchers muttered. "Already exceeding Jovian species tolerance levels." The pressure continued to build. 4G, 5G Kayla's vision started to darken around the edges, but she focused on a technique taught in deep space training. Control the breath, manage the pain, find the center. Approaching 6G, Vex reported. Subject's vital signs are elevated but stable. No sign of organ failure or skeletal collapse. "That's all you've got?" Kayla managed to gasp out. "My great-grandmother flew fighter jets at these levels." She wasn't lying. Much. Jennifer Harrison had been one of the first female F-35 pilots, pulling high-G maneuvers that would have killed most humans of her era. Kayla had inherited that stubbornness, along with her grandmother's talent for finding ways out of impossible situations. The pressure suddenly released. Kayla sucked in a deep breath, fighting the urge to show relief. Impressive, Ixo made notes on their pad. But gravity resistance is just one aspect we wish to study. Your species' ability to survive extreme temperatures, radiation, and toxic environments is of particular interest. Let me guess, Kayla flexed her hands, keeping the Vazrock's attention on her face rather than her slowly loosening restraints. You want to weaponize human genetics. Nothing so crude. Vex moved to another console. We seek to understand and replicate your adaptability. Imagine an army of enhanced Vazrocks, combining our technological superiority with human resilience. The temperature in the chamber began to drop. Frost formed on the metal surfaces as the cold bit into Kayla's skin. Most species would be going into hibernation or death sleep by now. But humans had survived ice ages with nothing but fur skins and fire. You know what your problem is. Kayla's breath fogged in the freezing air. You think resilience is just about physical endurance. Oh. Ixol stepped closer, genuinely curious. Please enlighten us. Resilience. Kayla felt the left wrist restraint give slightly, is about adaptation. Learning. Evolution. The temperature had to be approaching minus 40 degrees Celsius now. Humans don't just survive. We learn from every challenge. And what have you learned from this one? Vex asked, monitoring her core temperature with obvious fascination. Kayla smiled, despite her chattering teeth. That your security system uses a standard Galactic Council baseline code. That your restraints weren't designed for someone with military-grade skeletal augments, and that your species has a really bad habit of getting too close to your test subjects. Several things happened at once. Kayla's left arm shot free, enhanced muscles pushing through the weakened restraint. Her right leg followed, augmented bones snapping the frozen metal. Before the Vazrocks could react, she had Ixol in a headlock, using them as a shield. Here's today's lesson in human nature, she growled, feeling the first speaker's rapid pulse against her arm. We're really good at turning the tables. Alarms began to blare as chaos erupted in the laboratory. But Kayla had already spotted 3 possible escape routes, 2 weapon sources, and, most importantly, a computer terminal with external access. All she needed was an opening. The Vazrocks were about to learn that their greatest mistake wasn't capturing a human, it was capturing a human diplomat. Because diplomats, they were trained to notice everything, to find weaknesses, to exploit opportunities. And Kayla had noticed plenty. Now then, she tightened her hold on Ixo, watching the other Vazrocks freeze in place. Let's negotiate some new terms. The real experiment was just beginning. And this time, the Vazrocks were the ones being tested. Fascinating, Kayla muttered, scrolling through the classified files on the terminal. After 3 days of apparent cooperation with the Vazrocks' tests, they'd grown complacent enough to leave her unconstrained during rest periods. A classic interrogator's mistake. The laboratory's night cycle cast everything in dim blue light, but Kayla's military-grade ocular implants adjusted automatically. The data streaming across her screen painted a disturbing picture. The Vazrocks hadn't just been studying humans. They'd been preparing for a full-scale genetic harvesting operation. Accessing restricted section. The computer's A warned. Security protocols engaged. Kayla smiled, inserting a small device she'd assembled from seemingly harmless medical equipment. Let's see how your protocols handle a little Earth ingenuity. The hack was elegant in its simplicity, something she'd learned from the Arcturian pirates during a hostage negotiation gone sideways. Amazing what you could pick up in diplomatic service when you kept your eyes open and your mind flexible. New files populated the screen, research logs, genetic sequences, and most importantly, facility maps. "Oh, you arrogant bastards," she whispered, scanning the layouts. The Vazroks hadn't just built one testing facility. They had an entire network spread across 3 levels of the station, and in those facilities, human test subjects detected in Sector 7, the computer reported. Status: medical stasis. Count: 15. Kayla's hands clenched. 15 humans. Probably grabbed from various diplomatic missions or trade vessels, their disappearances disguised as accidents. Just like hers was supposed to be. A door hissed open behind her. Kayla's muscles tensed, but she recognized the distinctive gait of Chief Researcher Vex. "Unable to sleep, Ambassador." Vex's tone held that same clinical curiosity that made Kayla's skin crawl. "The tests must be taking their toll, despite your remarkable resilience." Actually, Kayla continued typing, making it look like simple medical record access. "I was reviewing my progress data. Fascinating stuff. Though I admit, some of your measurement methods seem inefficient." "Oh." Vex moved closer, exactly as she planned. Their scientific ego was their biggest weakness. For instance, Kayla gestured to a chart she'd prepared. "Your stress response measurements don't account for human neuroplasticity. We adapt not just physically, but mentally." "Intriguing." Vex leaned in, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the screen's glow. "Perhaps we should adjust our protocols." Kayla moved. One augmented elbow strike to their primary nerve cluster, followed by a precision hit to their secondary brainstem. Vex crumpled without a sound. "You should also work on your hand-to-hand combat training," she told their unconscious form, quickly retrieving their security badge and access codes. The next hour was a careful dance of system infiltration and misdirection. Kayla planted false data in their research logs, subtly altered security protocols, and most importantly, mapped the quickest route to Sector 7. She also found something else, something that made her blood run cold. Phase 2 implementation schedule, the file raid. Target: Earth colonies. Estimated yield: 10,000 human subjects. Primary objective: mass genetic extraction and enhancement synthesis. They weren't just planning to study humans. They were planning to harvest them. A soft alarm chimed. Shift change in 15 minutes. Kayla quickly erased her digital tracks and made her way back to her assigned quarters. As she lay on the too-hard bed, mind racing with plans and contingencies, she allowed herself a grim smile. The Vazroks thought they were the ones running experiments, but they'd forgotten the most important rule of scientific research. Sometimes the observer affects the observed. And humanity, we turned affecting things into an art form. Tomorrow would begin like any other day in the facility. She would submit to their tests, let them measure and probe and analyze. She would give them exactly what they expected, a resilient but ultimately contained subject. But now she had what she needed: knowledge, access, and most importantly, a reason to tear their entire operation apart. In the darkness of her quarters, Kayla began to plan. The Vazroks wanted to understand human adaptability. Fine. She'd show them exactly how adaptable humans could be. And by the time she was done, they'd learn another fundamental truth about humanity. Never, ever give us time to plan. Because while physical resilience might be impressive, it was nothing compared to human ingenuity backed into a corner. The Vazroks had built their entire operation around studying human limits. They were about to discover that humans didn't have any. Their own arrogance had given her everything she needed: access, information, time to think, and most critically, a righteous cause. Because if there was one thing more dangerous than a trapped human, it was a trapped human fighting to protect others. As the station's night cycle continued its artificial rhythm, Kayla refined her strategy. Tomorrow would be the beginning of the real experiment. And the Vazroks were about to become the test subjects. Humanity unleashed. The facility's alarm screamed through every corridor, but Kayla moved with calculated precision. Smoke billowed from the primary research lab, courtesy of a carefully orchestrated equipment malfunction. Behind her, she could hear the Vazrok security forces in chaos. Containment breach in sectors 3 through 6, the Station A announced. Biohazard protocols engaged. Perfect. The false biohazard alert would keep most of the station's personnel locked down, away from her real target, Sector 7. Stop her. Vex's voice echoed through the corridor. The human is attempting to. The rest was cut off as Kayla triggered her second surprise, a cascading power failure she'd programmed during her late-night research sessions. Emergency lights flickered, casting everything in strobing shadows. She reached the sealed doors of Sector 7, swiping Vex's stolen security badge. Inside, 15 stasis pods armed with artificial life. Each contained a human floating in suspension, their vital signs steady but weak. "Hold on," she muttered, moving to the central control station. "Cavalry's here." Her fingers flew across the console, initiating the revival sequence she'd memorized from the facility's files. The pods began to cycle, medical systems carefully bringing their occupants back to consciousness. The first pod opened with a hiss of escaping gas. Inside, a woman in tattered diplomatic dress began to stir. Then another pod opened, and another. "Welcome back." Kayla helped the woman sit up. "I'm Ambassador Harrison. We're leaving." "How?" The woman coughed, voice rough from disuse. "How long?" "Too long. But right now, we need to move. Can you walk?" One by one, the rescued humans regained consciousness. Some were diplomats like her. Others were merchants, scientists, even a few military personnel. All had been declared lost in various accidents. "The facility is equipped with emergency shuttles," Kayla explained as they gathered. "We've got about 10 minutes before." The doors burst open. Ixal stood there, flanked by armed guards. Their usually perfect composure was shattered, scales bristling with rage. "Remarkable," the first speaker hissed. "You've exceeded every parameter of our tests. But this ends now." Kayla stepped forward, positioning herself between the Vazroks and the recovering humans. "You're right, this does end now. But not the way you think." She held up a small data crystal. "Everything. Your research. Your plans for mass harvesting. The illegal experiments. It's all being transmitted to every major news outlet in the Galactic Council." Ixal's multifaceted eyes widened. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Check your communications array." "Oh, wait. You can't, because right about now..." A deep rumble shook the station. In the distance, something exploded. That would be your primary communications hub having a catastrophic meltdown. Funny thing about your security systems, they're great at keeping things out, but terrible at stopping things from getting out. The true test. The next few minutes were chaos. The freed humans, despite their weakened state, fought with desperate strength. Kayla had known they would. It was one thing to face a superior force. It was another to face humans who had nothing left to lose. But it was what happened next that would be remembered in Galactic Council records for centuries. As Ixal lay defeated, surrounded by their unconscious guards, they looked up at Kayla with something like fear. "Finish it," they spat. "Prove that humans are just as savage as we believed." Kayla knelt beside the fallen first speaker. "That's where you're wrong. Your mistake wasn't in studying human resilience. It was in not understanding why we're resilient." She stood, offering her hand to Ixal. "We don't survive because we're stronger or tougher. We survive because we understand something you don't. True strength isn't about how much you can endure. It's about what you choose to do with that endurance." The sound of approaching ships echoed through the station, Galactic Council peacekeepers responding to her transmitted evidence. "You have a choice now," Kayla continued, her hand still extended. "Face justice with dignity, help us dismantle these facilities properly. Or force us to do this the hard way. Show us, show everyone, what you learned about humanity." Ixal stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, they reached up and took it. Hours later, as the rescued humans received medical treatment aboard a Council medical ship, Kayla stood at a viewport watching Nexus station grow smaller in the distance. "Ambassador," one of the rescued diplomats approached. "The Council representatives want to know, why did you offer them mercy, after everything they did?" Kayla smiled, touching the viewport's cold surface. "Because that's humanity's real strength. Not our ability to survive, but our ability to choose, to rise above. To show that resilience isn't just about enduring pain. It's about preventing others from having to endure it too." She turned to face the gathered survivors. They wanted to understand human resilience. Fine. Let them understand this. We're not indestructible because we can't be broken. We're indestructible because we choose again and again to put ourselves back together, to help others do the same. And that, she added softly, watching the stars streak past, is a lesson worth teaching. The end.